Right, so I would like to welcome everybody. I'm so excited to see you from so many countries, and I also believe that I've also met some of you. So it's great to see your names appear again. So let me get started on this huge topic, assessing global skills. Before we move into the ideas, the details of assessment, let me do a quick check-in. The question is, how are you feeling right now? So put a number between 1 and 10 in the chat box. If you're very low in energy, that's number 1, so put number 1. If you're really high and very energetic, put number 10 in the chat box. So let's see what your energy levels are. Wow, it's quite varied. Someone's got even 3, but for most of you, it looks really good. Oh, 2. Oh, I'm really sorry about that. But for most of you, it's 5 plus. So that's great to see. Okay, I would like to ask you to remember your number. Okay, so do remember what your number is. And I have another question to ask you. What do you most want for your children or for your learners right now? So if you have your own children, as you can see on the photo, these are my 2 daughters, and this photo was taken in the summer. And, you know, I often think about, what do I really want for them? What kind of life, or what kind, you know, what kind of experience, or what do I want most for them? And I think the same idea needs to apply for our learners. So can you just put a couple of words, health, happiness, positivity, creativity, to enjoy life, enjoy learning, well-being, happiness and love. Oh, that's great. For their dreams to come true, no COVID, yes, healthy life, safety, well-being, success. Oh my God, this is great. Self-satisfaction. I'm so happy that you can actually think so deeply about your own learners. Recently, I asked this question on Facebook, and maybe I wasn't clear in the way I formed the question, but it seemed that most of my teacher colleagues were thinking mostly about what kind of learning they wanted for them, like a good teacher, good learning experiences. And actually, what you're putting here is like the ultimate aim for your students. And I think these are the aims, like happiness and health and well-being and creative life. And I think these are the ultimate aims we're working towards. And this is what global skills actually help us to focus in education, as we're not only language teachers, but we're also educators, and, you know, helping our learners to find the things that they enjoy in life, to find the things that make them happy, to find the ways to fulfill their dreams and to flourish. So in this webinar, we're going to look at what global skills are, if we look at them in terms of categories, which usually these categories help us understand it better and work towards it better. So it's very important for us to see the details of it. We'll also think about why we should assess global skills, the importance of assessment, and of course, practical ways of assessing these. And briefly, we'll look at some of the conclusions. So what are global skills? Here is a definition from OUP's position paper, which was put together by a panel of experts at Oxford University Press. And it says that it is increasingly recognized that education needs to cover more than traditional subjects. If learners are to equipped to flourish now and in the future, students of all ages need to learn the skills that are critical for lifelong learning and success. To be honest, I would probably replace the word success with the words that you have put, basically happiness and fulfillment, because that's really the ultimate aim of our life, to be happy. So I think we also need to replace this kind of idea that we need to have a good working place, and earn a lot of money, because that's a very limited idea of what happiness is. And as you put, the ideas that you've came up with is a lot broader term. So we'll be looking at this broader term. So basically, education needs to cover more than traditional subjects such as English, mathematics, geography, and so on. And also, these skills are critical for lifelong learning and happiness. So what are the global skills? And a panel of experts at Oxford University Press have come up with 5 clusters of global skills. And you may already have known or have heard about these. Now, if you look at these icons numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, can you maybe guess some of them, what these are? Put the number in the chat box, that the number of the icon that you have ideas about, and the type of global skill that you think it may represent. Number 1, cooperation, great. Collaboration, absolutely. Teamwork, great. Feel free to put the numbers randomly. Critical thinking, okay. So number 2 could be critical thinking. 4, digital skills, absolutely. Wonderful. Great ideas. Number 2, something connected to thinking, or teamwork. 3, well-being. Okay, wonderful ideas, absolutely. So let's look at them one by one. So number 1, as you have noted, communication and collaboration. Number 2, creativity and critical thinking. Now, communication and collaboration, creativity and critical thinking have already been part of, thinking about these important skills in the past. So they have been already very much prevalent in educational frameworks. But this time around, we're looking at them separately and different types of details. Number 3, as you have, I think some of you have put, guess this, intercultural competence and citizenship. So basically, is about intercultural competence is about the need to interact appropriately with people from diverse cultural backgrounds, which is particularly relevant in language learning. And citizenship is closely related to intercultural values and also relates to specific competencies in local and global communication. And if we go back to creativity and critical thinking, obviously critical thinking requires a creative mindset, and creative mindset also requires some critical thinking as well. So these are very important life skills. Now let's move on to number 4, which is digital literacies, as most of you have already guessed. obviously this is as we are very much affected by technology, especially nowadays under this pandemic. We need to be aware of skills such as how to create or share meaning in digital spaces, how to be safe online, and this obviously also overlaps with critical thinking and communication skills. Also, the digital world goes beyond geographic boundaries, and this requires intercultural competence and citizenship. So you can see how all of these global skills overlap as well. And as you've already suggested, number 5 is emotional self-regulation and well-being. And this has been overlooked for a number of years, but it has become really its importance has become very apparent, especially in the past 1.5 year, when we noticed a lot of challenges in this area. So in this skills cluster, such as emotional well-being, deals with things like autonomy, positive attitudes, motivation, being able to deal with your own emotions, etc. So let's look at this example, the latest one. So what are some emotional self-regulation and well-being challenges your learners, or maybe even yourself, have faced over the past year? Can you write some of these challenges in the chat box? So, for example, what I noticed that my students have had challenges with was being able to deal with their own frustrations. They were not very good at dealing with frustrations, and this was a very great obstacle, or it became an obstacle in their learning. So what are some other emotional issues or challenges or well-being challenges your students have faced, or yourself? Self-confidence, probably lowered self-confidence. Absolutely, I've noticed that too. Number of exams, learning with computers was draining, lack of self-confidence, the number of tests, they were confused, bullying on social networking sites, issues with communication, feeling lonely, not wanting to learn, self-isolation, confusion, they were irritated. Yes. So you can see that all of these things become very important, and we need to know how to help students, how to support students with these issues, and how to support ourselves as teachers, and then finding strategies of how to support them. So because of, you could see how important these things become. As I said earlier, this has become one of the major global skills to focus on: emotional self-regulation and well-being skills. So these are some of the main areas that we need to focus on in our teaching, and also to assess, and we'll look at ways of assessment later on. So recognize and identify, understand their own emotions, select healthy strategies for managing their own emotions, to demonstrate awareness of strategies to promote well-being, and ways of taking actions which contribute to physically, mentally, and socially healthy lifestyle. Which of these has become really important in your teaching context over the past 1.5 years? So which of these sections or parts of emotional self-regulation has become an important thing to focus on in your teaching context? Can you put in your answers in the chat box? First one, the last one. Absolutely. All of it. Yeah, so most of you put number one, recognizing and identifying and understanding their own emotions, and then taking actions. And I believe that these are really like the essential framework for all of these. And in between the two, so before they can actually, so it's very important to realize, what they're experiencing in terms of feelings. And then in order to actually take action and to be able to deal with these, they need to be aware of the strategies. So there is the importance of the middle section. What are some ways I can deal with my own emotions, with my own frustration, boredom, or whatever feelings I have? What are some of the strategies I can use for myself, or I can maybe how to get help so that I can actually take action? So you can see a lot of detail, and you can read about all of these global skills separately in a global skills position paper, which you can download from this link. And also you will also find examples of how to teach these skills, how to focus on these skills alongside your language teaching game. So how to have a double aim, so to have a language aim as well as a global skills aim in your lesson. So lots of practical activities. And then also finally you'll have ways of assessing these skills. Now, why should we assess global skills? Now, so first of all, what is the purpose of assessment, and what are the consequences of assessment, of assessing global skills? And to help us think about these two questions, I have a statement for you. Learners restrict their learning, and I put their learning twice, to what is to be assessed. So, is this true or false? What do you think? Do learners only learn the things that we as teachers assess, or, tell them that this is going to be assessed in the classroom? How far do you think this is true? Is that true in your teaching contexts? Totally, absolutely. In most cases, yes. Yeah, I would also add, unfortunately, it is true. So in most education systems that we have at the moment, the reality and the truth is that our students focus their learning only on the things that we assess. Of course, ideally, they would be focusing their learning on things that they are interested in, which would be probably, hopefully, in ideal situations, it would be a lot broader than what we offer them in education. That's another question we can discuss. But at the moment, this is the situation. So it is very important, therefore, to assess global skills, because that's how they will actually start to see its importance and then want to develop within these skills. So if we think about the purpose of assessment in these terms, we would probably find that parents would also see its importance only if it's assessed. And also educational institutions, our schools administration, would also see its importance only if it's assessed. So in order to strengthen the value of global skills, for all stakeholders, so students, teachers, parents, and school administration. We definitely need to assess it somehow. Most importantly, I find that assessment is important to be able to give effective feedback and to identify next steps in learning. And when I mean identify next steps in learning, not only by the teacher, but also by the learners themselves. So what can I do as a learner to become more creative? Or what can I do as a learner to be able to communicate more openly? And so on. So if we use assessment in this way, this would also motivate learners to develop their global skills. And it also gives them a sense of progress, like, last term I had real issues, talking about my own feelings. But this term, I can talk about it more easily. I can open up and share the way I feel more easily. And I do have some strategies how to deal with some of my emotions. So it also helps learners to feel, to have a sense of progress within global skills. Now, when we think about assessment, we know of these two different kinds of assessment. Assessment of learning and assessment for learning. Now, if we were to simplify assessment of learning, then usually in very simple terms, we can think of it as what we do when we give an achievement test or a progress test. And the primary purpose to see how well students have done and to give a grade. Now, there has been a lot of research that shows that actually grading can be harmful. And I think I have already talked about this, well, especially in Latvia, but in other countries too, about how grading is not helping learners learn, neither to be motivated. And the other one, because it's not helping learners learn because it doesn't necessarily give us much information about what is actually happening in the classroom. So it doesn't help us as teachers to plan future lessons, and it doesn't really help learners to see what exactly do they need to improve in if they only see a grade. And the second type of assessment is assessment for learning. And there are three main areas in assessment for learning. And within this, the purpose is to know what we need to focus on. So for this, we find out where the students are in their learning. How much is it that they know within a particular area? What is it that we need to focus on more in the future? Secondly, where they need to go. So what are some of the aims? So these may be different for different students. Some students need to improve their digital literacies more than others. And other students may need to improve on their emotional self-regulation and well-being skills. So these could be different from student to student. And they really need to be aware of what they're aiming towards. And finally, and most importantly, they need to know how to get there. So all of these can be done through assessment for learning. Now, which types of assessment is mostly done in your educational systems where you are in your teaching context. Assessment of learning for grades or assessment for learning. So grading or assessment for learning. Which one is more prevalent in your teaching context? Can you type your answers in the chat box? Both, that's great. Grading, both. Of learning, mix, both. Oh, I'm really happy to see that. Great, lovely. I think that assessment of learning, yeah. So there, because more and more schools realize how grading can actually be harmful, because it doesn't help us understand learning, and it doesn't help us, it doesn't inform our teaching and what kind of methods and content to focus on in our teaching. There are more and more schools choosing to focus on assessment for learning, which is so much more dynamic and richer and unique from student to student. Right now, so these two different types of assessment are also referred to as summative and quantitative, and the assessment for learning is referred to as formative and qualitative. Now, why do you think there are two different arrows? So what are the arrows trying to signal here? Have you got any ideas? Can you maybe type your ideas in the chat box? What are the arrows trying to say about, so the backward arrow, why is it, pointing backwards? An assessment for learning, why is it pointing forwards? Absolutely, it shows the different purposes, past and future, Marina, absolutely. So basically, assessment of learning focuses on what has been learned. Yeah, so focuses on the past. Whereas assessment for learning, it shows us where to go as well. So it really points towards the future. And that's why there's these different arrows. So that's why we're using this contrast. Now, let's look at one of the clusters individually to kind of work out what this means. So within emotional self-regulation and well-being skills, the students can recognize, identify their own emotions. Now, when I first read this, I was thinking, gosh, but how can I assess this? What can I do about this? How can I help my students develop these skills? Do you have any questions about this area? This particular area, the student can recognize, identify their own emotions. So what are some questions you have about assessing these skills in the classroom? Can you type them in the chat box? Yes, it's definitely connected with feelings. With understanding, students can recognize, absolutely. Yes, Katarina. So let me share some of the questions I had when I first saw this. So I was thinking, can this be measured in numbers? Because, at schools, we give them grades. So I cannot measure it in numbers, can I? Can I measure it in labels? How can I measure, the ability to recognize feelings and emotions in labels? I'm not sure. Also, what is my role in assessing their ability to recognize emotions? Can I really do that? And what is the learner's role in this assessment? Can they maybe assess their own ability to recognize emotions? This is a very subjective area. So that's why I had all these questions. So how can I assess these skills? And maybe you have also thought about these questions too. So in the position paper, all of these questions are answered. And it says that how and what we assess should directly encourage the skills we want learned. So if we want them to develop at this skill, the student can recognize their own emotions. In that case, the way we assess should directly encourage the development of this skill. So let me give you some examples of how we can actually do this. So again, these are the 5 different clusters. So we'll be looking at examples through each of them. So if we have this example, take actions which contribute to a physically, mentally, and socially healthy lifestyle. Do you remember which global skill this is referring to? Which of the 5 global skills this is referring to? Oh my God, Elmira, there are so many C's and 9s there. So which of, yes, absolutely, it's well-being. Good. What about the next one? Deploy data literacy to derive meaningful information from digital data sources. Which of the global skills was this out of the 5 ones? Absolutely, it's digital literacy. Good. Next one. Present coherent arguments about the source, reliability, and accuracy of information. What do you think? Which global skills is this? You are right. Yes. It's creativity and critical thinking. Absolutely. Great. Well done. And next one. Understand and appreciate their cultural identities or multicultural identities, if that's the case. And I think this is really important, especially when we talk about global citizenship. It's very important that we first of all understand our own cultural identities and what that means to us, and we'll realize its importance, because that's the only way we can then appreciate other cultures and other types of identities there are. Yes, so this was part of the intercultural competence and citizenship. And finally, show empathy with others and understand a range of alternative perspectives. Which global skill is this? Absolutely, yes. So it's communication and collaboration. So you could see just a few examples taken from each global skill. Now, in order to assess these, we need classifications and success criteria. And in order to make it manageable in the classroom, the panel of experts have come up with these 3 different success criteria: working towards, achieved, and exceeded. So these ratings are used holistically in terms of best fits in relation to the competence statement that you can find under each cluster. Let me tell you about an example. So if we're thinking about collaborate through learning from others, yeah, so that's a skill, to be able to collaborate through learning from others, which is part of the communication and collaboration cluster. So how do we assess whether a student can collaborate through learning from others? Now, maybe this student is working towards this if we find that they can participate in collaborative activities, but they tend to rely on examples from the book or the examples that they see that are modeled by the teacher, but there's no autonomous learning or significant learning from others. So that would be only working towards. Now, when can we assess this as achieved? Well, when we see that the student is able to take things from others and learn from them. And exceeded, when we can see that the student actively engages in supporting others as well in their learning. So these are the ways you can use these three success criteria: working towards, achieved, and exceeded. Now, how do we do that? What are some of the tools we can use in our everyday classroom, everyday teaching? Well, the first one is observation and dialogue. Basically, the way I do it, I have a notebook like this one, and on each page, I have a student's name at the top, and under their name, I have the 5 global skills, the names for the global skills, and in a lesson, I decide to maybe observe maximum 1 or 2 or maximum 3 students in one of those areas. Or if I notice anything, outstanding, then I also make note of that. And that's one way to just observe. I also maintain dialogues with them, and I will show you some examples later on. There's also learner evidence. So basically, students do some work, and you observe their work and the way they work, and that's what you can use to assess. And the way we give feedback, and they also self-assess themselves, and learner portfolios. Now, let me show you a few examples through Oxford Discover Futures. So let's look at observation and dialogue. So within this, informal observation, as I said earlier, and prompting deeper thinking. So here's an example of an activity from the book. So here in this activity, students study some tips for remembering vocabulary. Let me show you what it looks like. So basically, below the activity, students can read about different types of or different ways of remembering vocabulary. And they read about those, and then they need to complete a chart in their notebook, whether they need to think about whether they use it and what they think about it. Now, we can see critical thinking when students give their opinions of these study tips. We can also see collaboration when they work together, when they compare their answers with their partner. And we can also assess emotional well-being when we observe how they feel about each of the suggestions. Then we can further prompt them towards deeper thinking through questions we can ask them. So we can ask, which, in your opinion, is the best tip and why? Which one do you think you will try? Which of the tips, the vocabulary memory tips, you can try and why? How have you organized yourselves to do this? Do you think this is the best way of doing it? So getting them to really relate everything they read about or listen to their own lives, to themselves, and through talking about it, through expressing their opinions of these things that they read about, and also expressing their feelings um, in connection with these topics. Then there's also learner evidence. So what is this? Well, there is the output, the kinds of products that we can collect. So maybe they create a poster, maybe they write a blog post, they work together to create a story together, an interesting story together, and so on. So there can be different types of output. Within this, we also need to look at success criteria, and we need to give them opportunities for self-assessment. So let's look at an example again from Oxford Discover Futures. So in the next part of this lesson on how can they improve their memory, there are a number of activities which focus on output. So there's some kind of result that you can see. As you can see in exercise number 7, they invent a memory journey using all of the words in the shopping list, and they have to use their imagination. In exercise number 8, they work in pairs and they compare the memory journeys from exercise 7 and who has the most memorable journey. And finally, they are asked to reflect on their memory techniques that they use from exercise 2, that they use from this list of these tips of how to build memory. So there's different ways they actually show that they've not just understood, but they can use those tips. Let's look at how we can assess students through this. So this activity asks students to try out these memory strategies and then compare and evaluate what they've just done. And this is developing critical thinking and creativity, communication and collaboration, and possibly also looks at well-being. Now let's look at success criteria. Well, one very useful way of helping students to move forward in their learning is to make them aware of what success looks like. So we need to give them examples and models of that particular activity which meet the criteria in different ways, or compare previous examples of working towards achieved and exceeded and discuss the differences. So the advantage of doing this, so comparing, for example, to what they've done to a model, would be that students would become more aware of the global skills in general. They would also be aware of what's expected of them, and they will be able to use this within their self-assessment. And then they will be able to follow a model they can practice. So let's look at again this example of self-assessment. So when students reflect on the techniques, you can get them to think about, have I been able to use all the techniques from exercise 2? Which ones have I not used well? Which ones can I use more of? And so on. So in this way, as they're doing self-assessment, they are thinking about their own skills and they will be probably more engaged in their own learning. They will want to, because they see what they're good at and what they're not good at, and they will identify those things themselves. They will be more motivated to do something about it and develop, maybe use more memory techniques, and how to do that. Now, in terms of feedback, I think these three areas are very important to look at. Why are we doing this? To involve learners in feedback through questions and to negotiate a criteria. So again, let's look at an example through Oxford Discover Futures, and this this activity, collaborate and plan. So instead of giving learning goals at the beginning of a lesson, which is quite common, we do this quite frequently, that we just write the aim of the lesson, or we write the aim of certain activities on the board. So instead of doing that, we can show them an activity from the book and ask them to look at it and just think about it. Why are we doing this? How do you think this helps you develop? What are some of the areas that you think this would help you in? What is the purpose of this activity? So in this way, students get into the habit of reflecting on what they're doing and the reason why they're doing it. So this aims to make students aware of what they're doing and really see the value of it. Also, we need to encourage learners to ask questions. So instead of us asking questions, what are some of the ways we can encourage them to ask questions? And one idea is exit questions. So at the end of the lesson, learners write questions on slips of paper before leaving the room. And as they leave the room, I just collect these slips of paper. And through their questions, I can see their thinking, how they're thinking, what are some of the things that we need to continue to focus on, what are the things that, wow, they completely exceeded in and they're going into depth of it. And also through asking questions, they also feel valued, that they're really part of learning. You know, it really develops their own interest in the topic. And then there's lots of things you can do with these questions. You can maybe give it back to them next time. You can put them on a board and get them to look at them and choose the most interesting ones they would like to discuss as a class. You can get them to categorize these questions into different categories. So you can get them to do projects on some of the big questions they've asked. So go and research their own answers. So basically, they will realize that it's not only the teacher or the course book which are sources of knowledge, but also, you know, they can learn a lot through their own questions and their own discoveries. You can help them come up with questions in groups as well. So you give them a topic, for example, memory techniques, and get students to generate questions, and you will see how amazing you know, their thinking is, or how creative their thinking is. Sometimes they come up with the most interesting questions that I hadn't thought of. So just giving them this space to ask questions and then build your teaching on it is a great way of getting them to assess themselves as well. And once, for example, they brainstorm their questions around the topic, they can then exchange their questions within the groups and then answer them. So this is another way of self-assessment. Now let's look at another example from the same unit, where they have to present a chart to the class. So basically here, students need to give a presentation. But when they are preparing for this presentation, the questions that they ask themselves is like, okay, how long should I present for? What makes a good presentation? What are some of the criteria that I am going to be assessed upon? So there's lots of criteria that they need to be aware of. And these criteria can be negotiated through asking students. So ask students, what do you think that we should assess in this presentation? And at this stage, I give them post-it notes and they write what they think, what are some of the things that make a good presentation. So for example, look up and look at your audience, speak clearly, stand up straight, speak in a way that everyone can hear you, keep it short, and so on. So students just brainstorm different things that they think that makes up a good presentation. And once they've done that on post-it notes, you can get them to then you add some of the things that you think, this is also important. So let me add some other ideas, because you're the teacher, you're probably the expert in this. And sometimes you need to add a few more criteria so that everything is covered. So say what your topic is at the beginning. Use specific examples. Make sure you have a conclusion. Maybe include a personal anecdote and so on. And then you can, in order to get them to work with this success criteria, get students to think about it through categorizing them, through putting these criteria in different categories, such as things that are connected to speech and manner, ways of making it interesting to the audience, and things that help the audience follow your presentation easily. So you can get students to work with the criteria. And this is true not only for giving presentations, but for other outputs as well. For example, letter writing, or when you write a blog post. What makes a good blog post? What are some of the criteria? And then students will be able to use these criteria to assess themselves. And all of these are again from a position paper called Effective Feedback, and you can download it from this link. And it includes lots and lots of examples of how to give effective feedback, how to provide students with self-assessment activities that are also enjoyable. And another way of assessing global skills is through learner portfolios. So first of all, when students, when we talk about learner portfolios, it's a great idea to get students to collect and select the things they want to be assessed on. So what are some of the things that should be included in the portfolio? I think it's good if it's decided by the student and not the teacher. And then who should assess the portfolio? Again, I feel that it's very important that it's not only the teacher who assesses the portfolio, but also the students themselves. So once they are familiar with the criteria, with the success criteria, get students to assess themselves. They will probably feel better if they assess themselves first, and then they read your assessment. The two will be in more harmony. It is very likely that they will be in more harmony if you give them the space to think about their own work within the negotiated criteria before you provide them with your own assessment. And also, when we look at evidence of global skills within this portfolio, which of the global skills can be assessed using portfolios? Well, communication and collaboration as communication as the content of the portfolio, such as speaking. There could be students make a recording, or students record an interview to be done, or they write things, they write a blog post, they write a composition, they write a letter to you, they write letters to each other, they write a letter to their future selves, and so on. So there's a lot of outputs you can, or a lot of communication skills you can assess through this. Collaboration, again, is part of the process. So you can look at collaboration as well. Creativity and critical thinking, again, can be assessed through learner portfolios, because creativity is part of the production of the products that are put in the learner portfolio. Intercultural competence and citizenship. Now, if you discuss these themes, they can be part of the tasks. You can give students content or questions to discuss that relate to understanding other cultures as well, or other people, other identities. Digital literacies, again, can be assessed, because you can ask them to produce something online, to write within a forum, or write a blog post. Again, using digital literacies is part of that. And emotional self-regulation and well-being, again, can be part of the discussions, how they feel about working online, how they feel about being distracted by digital devices, and so on. So moving towards closing this, so let's think about this statement. I cannot assess my learners effectively only if I am able to assess myself first. So now we're looking at ourselves as teachers, or so not the students, but ourselves. Is this true? Do you think for yourself? Do you believe this is true, that I cannot assess myself only if I am able to assess myself first? Absolutely. Absolutely. Very often I've seen so many teachers just go and just tell students, this is, you're good at this, you're not good at that, you're good at this, you're not good at that, but have not been very good at looking at themselves first, and just realizing, for example, what it feels like to be judged, what it feels like to be told whether you're good or not good at something. So before we assess students within these global skills, I think it is very important that we assess ourselves first. So I would like to invite you to download the position paper, look at the global skills, and maybe, just spend some time with looking at one cluster, or just one of them within one of the 5 clusters. And just think about it for yourself, reflect on your abilities to maybe identify your own emotions. Also, what is my attitude as a teacher towards all of this? How open am I towards, focusing on global skills as well? Do I have enough knowledge to be able to work with my students within these areas? What are some of the teacher skills that I need to possess in order to be able to, focus on these global skills? Do I need to improve any of my teacher skills to be able to help students with dealing with emotions, for example? If yes, how do I do that? And so on. So I think we're running out of time, but these are some of the questions I have been asking myself. And to be honest, it has really helped me develop, not only as a teacher, asking these questions myself, but also as a person. So I think in order to help our students develop in all of these areas, it is very important that we develop ourselves first. And through that, we also give them a map of how to do this. We would be more sensitive towards these areas and will have acquired the skills of how to do this, and we can then pass on these skills to our learners. So to conclude, we need to look at assessment for learning when we are talking about global skills. So qualitative assessment, and not thinking about grades at all. So forget about grades when we're talking about global skills. We need to assess it because it's only valued if we assess it. And also we have to assess ourselves before we assess students. Think about the success criteria as working towards, achieved, and exceeded. The tools that we have are observation and dialogue, learner evidence, giving effective feedback, and learner portfolios. And here's the link that you can download with lots and lots of examples, not only of assessment, but also of how to teach these skills as natural part of your language lessons. And a final check-in, can you put your number, how you're feeling right now? Low in energy, 1. High in energy, 10. Or any numbers in between. What is your energy number right now? 20. Oh, that's it. Whew, that's great. Oh, I can see some high numbers. Lovely. I'm wondering if it has increased your number. If you compare the two, has it increased or not? Well, to me, it looks like it's going very fast, but it looks like numbers have gone up for most of you. And this is a very quick way of also focusing on self-regulation, emotional self-regulation and well-being with your classes as well. So thank you very much for your participation. Let me check if I have time. Do I have time for questions and answers?
The room will close automatically in 8 minutes. So if you wish to answer one,
Okay.
that would probably about right. Unless you can answer really quickly.
Yeah, so how does the teacher assess portfolios? Is it paper version or digital version? I think that's a very good question. Well, it can be a set of paper and digital, a mix. Basically, at the beginning of the term, you decide what are some of the elements, possible elements of a portfolio. Maybe there can be 10 different types of things. There could be a blog post, a recorded interview, a story, a digital poster, etc. And then students, and you give a certain number of maximum points for each of them. But obviously you will discuss the criteria, success criteria for each of them separately. And then students decide on which ones they would like to be included in the portfolio. And you do self-assessment, as we discussed earlier, using the negotiated criteria. So part of the portfolio will be also self-assessment and your own assessment. And that's how you help students improve within the areas. I hope that was quick enough. let me just look at one more question. Can you please tell me some words about self-assessment too, with concrete examples? I think we looked at some of them, but basically, for example, whenever there's an output, for example, there is you're talking about, I don't know, you're giving your students a project to research a topic, and then they have to write a PowerPoint and then give a presentation to the class. And then before they start working on this, you can discuss the criteria. What is it that would make the PowerPoint good? And what are some of the things that would make the presentation good? And when students have finished their work, but not handed it in yet, there is a set of questions that they answer themselves. Is it clear enough? Is my presentation clear enough? Does it contain enough information? Is it correct? Is the language used correctly? Is the language appropriate for the presentation, and so on? And then students write a self-assessment description, which is again part of the portfolio. So this is how you can do it. And I can see that the webinar platform started the countdown. So thank you very much for your questions and for your active participation. And I really hope that next time I will be able to see you all in person.
Thank you very much to both of our brilliant speakers, to Erika and to Shapa. And yes, indeed, we will be finishing in about 4 minutes. You will be automatically redirected to the feedback form. And just as a small reminder, within 5 to 10 working days, you will be getting an email with a link to the recording of these webinars, also a handout and a certificate of attendance. So thank you very much for taking part in it, and we look forward to seeing you again.